Welcome to The Quiet Place, the premier luxury designer broadcast from Gucci. And our first guest, Mika, is already here. Mika, how you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I'm just smoking a cigarette in my apartment.
Welcome.
Um,
Yes, it's very good to have you on. Thank you for coming on. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself for people who aren't aware of your work?
I am a writer, more controversially a poet, uh, and I also run a literature website art project thing called surfaces.cx. Um, and my latest book just came out. Only book came out back in February, called No Tiger. And yeah, I just write poetry about anything that really compels me, but like it tends to fall towards especially in the book, like warfare and like media, um, and like how identity, um like gender and sexuality and stuff are distorted by those things. um but in the past, and I guess like going on, like I tend to have a lot of like horror and like sci-fi influence and stuff. I've always been like a big like pulp genre fan.
Yeah, I can definitely see those influences in there. Some of the things that struck me in that was like some of the mix of sort of the interest in warfare machinery, like almost like it's almost like a Hunt for Red October-esque kind of fixation on the military machinery, but also having this sort of dark atmosphere around it and incorporating it into a very poetic sort of discourse.
Yeah, um so I I think that like from what I've gathered, that's like a thing that seemed to like, I don't know, I'd never really seen it before in poetry, and I kind of just started doing it kind of like spontaneously because I was like, I'd never really done that kind of thing before. Like a lot of my work before I started writing the bulk of stuff that's in No Tiger was a lot more it has more like elements of like almost like gothic romanticism and stuff, where like a lot of it is like evocative like scenery and everything, and didn't really have anything like any technical details or anything like that to it. I was just like would describe like landscapes and everything. um and the obsession with like warfare tech came like basically right before I started writing the book in like 2019, and I just like got really into reading about it, and like I would be trawling around like for diagrams constantly and everything. Like I have like tons of PDFs of just like military manuals and stuff, and um there's more of that in the like zine that came before the book, because like the collage work, like I did like a lot of stuff that isn't as present in the book, like just like mixing in like diagrams and stuff with the poems. um and I think it comes partially because my dad was like a veteran, but I don't know even know where like the obsession came from. It just kind of happened spontaneously because I've always been in like first person shooter video games and like military sci-fi, but like the obsession with like real like warfare and tech is very new to me.
And you of course occasionally mix it with fantasy elements. I know that Jeremy, the host here, was really attracted to one of the poems that sort of described this sort of and I need to grab the book in a minute, but it was like a poem that involved this like a almost like a bionic like eagle descending from the sky.
Yeah.
Which one was that, Jeremy?
Well, I can't find my physical copy, but I've got the PDF here.
But I assure you, I did buy it. And I don't. The style overall really reminds me of Sylvia, Emily Dickens, Emily Dickinson. Uh, do you attribute that as an influence, as her as an influence? Because I feel that same kind of I don't know, almost abstract play with words, but also like real pregnant with conviction. You know.
Like I don't like think honestly like it's hard for me to pin down exactly where the influences came from because like I did like used to read like Emily Dickinson and stuff and um I also read a lot of like the like romantics back when I was in like high school, but I feel like a lot of my poetry um like especially the stuff I write now, the mode I write now, honestly, a lot of it, it's almost like embarrassing to say, but like a lot of it like started out with me just trying to like bite like death grips really hard and stuff. Like their lyricism and also the way I write prose tends to come from like a lot of my obsession with Joyce early in like high school and stuff. So I don't know, like like I wouldn't say Emily Dickinson was like a influence necessarily. But I do, whenever I read her work now, especially, do feel like a resonance there. One of the fun things about like my book and everything with people reacting to it is that I'm like, I've had to deal constantly with it's exciting, but like with people saying like it reminded them of this or that and me and like at points being like, oh, I've never even like read this person before. I've never read them before. It just kind of happened.
So I mean, the reader brings their own, you know, experiences to a text too, though. You know, that's an interesting thing, and people will get, you know, accused of borrowing from this or that, and actually, it's probably more like they're all drawing from the same, you know, pool of creativity, I guess, right?
Yeah, like I feel as if like even with like the influences and stuff that writers have, a lot of it has to do with like what they already like value or um value aesthetically or thematically in their own work. And so like I always feel like when I come to a writer and feel drawn to their work, it like that resonance is there because like I already like I'm already like on that wavelength at least partially. I'm just being like pulled into it further by seeing someone else like make it real or actualize it in some way.
Is it all? Would it be all right if I pulled up the one that I think Ben is referring to here? Would that be a problem?
No, yeah, go ahead. I would love to know which one you're talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Death Grips because I can definitely see that as an influence. Like, and you know, speaking of like that, like when I read through the books, it's one of those books that reminded me more of like music acts and other writers. Like I kind of mentioned Vatican Shadow in my Goodreads review of it because uh, it has that sort of like dark and oppressive atmosphere while also having this you know, focus on military conflict as well as this sort of implicit criticism of U.S. presence in the Middle East. And sort of just by coincidence, I had started listening to the rapper Backwash before that, which was an interesting coincidence because both No Tiger and Backwash have very angry and dark expressions of trans identity.
Oh yeah, I love Backwash. Like
If more poets wrote like this, I would probably be more, you know, hip to poetry. I've been pretty outspoken as a critic about poetry, but I mean, when it's like when it's written like this and not flowery and sing songy like most people who profess themselves to be poets make their poetry. I mean, I can live with this, you know, when it's like the language is rich, like copper crown dug through skull, a girl exists shift to shift. a forever humiliation, forced to regularly beg for her life, praying to false royalty to see tomorrow. Demons made the regular, coral snakes around her irises, all while she grovels under boots. There's prettied up war machines on an infinite battlefield, up-tempo mortars in the skybox, 24/7 entertainment always on channel 18, and ads at every corner yelling, "Let us make you our murder doll." That's beautiful. That's that is a very Emily Dickinson kind of rhythm too. I'm surprised if you have never read her.
Yeah, I've read her in the past, but like it was mostly like it wasn't at the level that like the other like the writers that I do cite as influences were. Like I'm aware of her, but not like particularly like familiar with her like others are. And like definitely like the style that I'm working with how like I write and like phrase things is something that came from like me like obviously biting death grips and then also like being really into Joyce and stuff, but there was like a period of a few years like after I started writing like this or kind of started writing more in this mode where I I wasn't really reading anything. I was like I especially was not reading anybody contemporary. I was just writing stuff and like I would watch movies and play video games, listen to music, but I wasn't really reading like literature very much. That's kind of a thing I got back into in the last like couple years.
Yeah, I can definitely see that there's influences from, especially like, being online and so forth. You have the poem Flashland in here, or maybe a prose piece. I don't know what you call it, which is like about this sort of weird online program, and that one piece that I posted, Semtex ads in the back of Shonen magazines. The that part, of course, I mentioned really resonated with me because I've had nights like that where I can't sleep, so I'm just up going down rabbit holes of weird conspiracy theories. So I really love that paragraph in it.
Yeah, I love literature and stuff, but like I've always been a pretty like outspoken person about especially with poets on how I think that there's a lot of value in like trying to look to other mediums or look to like just things that aren't literary in nature for like inspiration or like just ideas. Because I have had that frustration with contemporary poets before where like I just am not interested in a lot of it because even though like I do enjoy like classic like poets and stuff, I don't know, there's just something about a lot of contemporary stuff that comes out of like MFAs or like the magazines that are under them and just indie literature in general that like I just am bored by. And I've been kind of like I guess purposefully trying to be provocative before where I've said stuff like anime and manga have more to contribute to literature than literature does and stuff like that.
You know what? I'll get on board with that actually. Yeah, because literature, I mean, has to remind itself it's literature, and things that are done for joy, and the fun of the medium, like anime and manga. I mean, yeah, they're for the joy of storytelling. So I can get on board with that definitely.
Yeah, there's like I've read like when I was in college, I binged a lot of Shintaro Kago manga, and I think he was definitely a big influence. Like there was like a sense in me is like I want to write things in the same way that reading these weird ass comics makes me feel.
Yeah, like when I first like started doing this like more aggressive mode that I'm in now, which like before there was a period for like a couple years when I first started, when I first got into writing that were like I was kind of like obsessed with like the image of like the poet in a traditional sense, and like I was engaged with a lot of this like stuff that was like the hot trend in indie literature back in like the early 2010s, which was like like that was like what alt lit, when people say that, like actually was, that's where the term originated.
Yeah.
Like stuff like Tao Lin and everything, and it was kind of like twee and like more like indie rock lyrics and stuff.
Yeah.
But like there was this point where like when I got disillusioned with what alt lit turned out to be, I kind of like just isolated myself, and like for about a year, like I just kind of sat down and was like, I don't want to write like this anymore. And then I just eventually figured out something I wanted to do, and it was this more aggressive kind of like, I don't know, like I really, even though it's sometimes simplistic in how I kind of distort grammar, I find a lot of satisfaction from doing it, because just phrasing something in a slightly different way from how you're supposed to in a regular sentence, like just gets a lot from me. Like I find it really exciting in a way that I don't know, it's hard to describe, but I just like writing things for punchiness rather than um necessarily building like a cohesive like song like flow over the course of a piece.
This one right here, this is the one Ben was talking about that I just thought was insanely good, and it almost seems like fiction, a prose, like fiction. Have you ever tried your hand at that? The imagery in this is insane. Wolves in body armor, howling at nothing, hungry, 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 eating and killing and shitting for. I don't know if that's blocking out profanity or just unable to complete the thought, but siege upon their own ramparts, hungry. That's good. That's good punchy description there.
Yeah, I the more prosy stuff in the book is like, so like I'm often kind of ambiguous about how I describe it, but it is like essentially me trying to write like prose poetry. Like there's earlier stuff that isn't in the book that I did write like in the past 2 years that is um more in this mode, and it uses like the slashes a lot more, like to divide things instead of just periods and stuff. And like I kind of started just trying my hand at writing something that looks like prose, but I wrote it like poetry, where like individual sentences and stuff can just be used to describe like a single like evocative image instead of trying to propel any kind of plot. And I think that like I'm trying right now with my current book project to write in a kind of in between, like something that's more just prose fiction and something like what is in the book. Kind of going off of like the Flak Wolves piece, which I think is like, in my opinion, I think that is like that's the capstone to like the whole thing. Like I think that's the big climactic finish to everything I was trying to do with the book. And I'm wanting to continue doing that, and like I am trying to do more, I guess, fiction in a long form sense, but still trying to keep what I did or what I managed to do with that particular piece.
Awesome.
Which, funnily enough, that piece has a interesting backstory to it. I wrote that like after, like, so all the pieces in the book are mostly from 3 zines that I like released over the course of the past 2 years. And that one is from the last zine I released, which is entirely all the like warfare poetic stuff. Like it was entirely focused on that. And I wrote that after I'd already decided, like, oh, like I finished this zine, I'm gonna release it, blah blah blah, like on this date. And then I don't know, remember what happened. I think it was, I saw this like line someone used to describe like a TV show where they said it was like figures in a landscape killing or being killed for no discernible reason. And I just like saw that, and it like woke something up in me, and I realized I want to write something that like evokes this particular description. Um, and I just like I had to like delay like the zine and just write that, and I just like was in a fury like writing that whole thing. And it was one of the most like emotionally like draining things to write because it like for me when I write really bleak stuff, there's like a level to which like it makes me feel like bad and uncomfortable. Like I get satisfaction from it, but also it just feels like exhausting to write like that a lot. And I had to like take a break in between writing it because I just like I wrote like a bit of it and I just was like, this is so dark and awful and it's putting me in a bad like headspace. So I had to take a break from it before I finished it.
Might not have been as powerful if you had tried to write it in one sitting, right?
Yeah, like I just hit a point where I was like writing it, and I think that also part of like writing these things and like not doing it all in one go is part of what results in like the sort of like especially with this piece, the sort of melancholy that it takes on like in the later like half of it, where it's bleak and violent, but also there like I hint at like a sense of like tragedy to care the main character of it, and that's something that's started to take on like or become more prominent like the more I write these sort of like prose narratives with like an actual like central character, is that I always have a sense of the tragic or just like sadness to like what's going on, because I never like am it like interested in writing just a reveling in violence. Like there's a level of like where these characters are forced into it and basically just are like fall into it and don't really have a choice and don't necessarily want to be involved, but they kind of just are, and there's no other like way out.
Yeah, that I think that definitely makes sense because violence can be fun to write, but if you are trying to do something where you want the people to give a damn about the characters at least on some level, it's hard to just not focus on the. It's hard to not like go into like the consequences of the violence and the fallout, which usually isn't pretty. One thing that I always compare in my head is Quentin Tarantino to Sam Peckinpah. Tarantino, a lot of times it feels like he is just reveling in violence, whereas Peckinpah, even as most violent, is always exploring the downfall of it, or the fallout of it, which is why a lot of his movies end up being very depressing.
Interestingly enough, like Tarantino is a used to be like a big influence on my work like early on when I started writing like this, because I was writing a lot of stuff that early on that was like very much just like I was basically just trying to do like grindhouse like film as poems and stuff. And it was just kind of uncritical like reveling in it. And then I started like in the past couple of years getting more into this introspective headspace about it, where it doesn't feel good to like revel in this all the time. And like I've had a lot of like conflicted feelings I've posted about before, especially since the book came out and seeing people react to it, about how my relationship to this kind of work. And I definitely think uh interestingly, Peckinpah was kind of an influence on this, because I last year had just like got like introduced to his work and watched The Wild Bunch for the first time, which is an incredible movie. I adore it.
Yeah, if you haven't seen his other works, I highly recommend it, especially like Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia and Cross of Iron. Um, those are kind of on very similar themes. Um, the so you've No Tiger, was it about how much of it was new material that you had was a good chunk of it old material, or was it mostly like new material that you had written specifically for the collection?
So like I really like the book kind of came about on accident, where like I realized like because all the stuff I had released was out there for like free, but then I realized I wanted like something physical, and so I was like shopping around for a publisher, um, and I got directed to Apocalypse Party by a friend, and like didn't expect much of it, but then Ben, the like Devos, the editor, like read my zines and said like, oh, like if you want to put together like a manuscript, I'll like take it of this stuff. And so like most of it is stuff that was already out there in some form, but like I did rewrite some of it. I did like change things around, and uh a couple of the collages are things that like didn't make it in, like the zines. And also I think, yeah, all of the prose pieces other than Flak Wolves were not like collected in any way. They were just stuff that I had like put out there at some point, like on mostly on Surfaces, my website.
What was the reason that you called it No Tiger? I know that it is a line in the book. It's I couldn't find it specifically, but it was something like such and such is no tiger. What was the reason you chose that as the title for the book?
It's out there, like it's in the book a couple of times, repeated, and like mainly the reason I chose it is because the overall like feeling of the book to me and the way that I wrote the violence in the book, I think is um evoked by that. And basically the title means like, or the phrase "I'm no tiger," etc., is a admission of like weakness, even in the face of like this like brutal violence, or even committing it, that like there's a level of weakness or futility to it, where these characters are not entirely meant to see, especially a couple of them aren't strong people. They're not strong like personalities. They're forced into this situation by circumstance, or um just by the environment around them, and there's just not much they can do about it. And that's kind of just how the feeling that I have in general about this kind of thing, where um like I write all of this violent stuff, but like in the end, it's not like I'm not like someone that I would consider a violent person, or a particularly even aggressive person. I it's like something that I write because like I have to, and because like I don't feel like I can write anything else like except what I'm writing at the time. And when I wrote this stuff at the time, like there was nothing else that I could just write on command, in my opinion. Like I felt compelled to it in some way.
I see. And to kind of go back a little bit, when you started surfaces.cx, was that originally just for your writing, or did you have plans to like make it a place where people could submit their own work?
So interesting background on Surfaces. I didn't found it. Like I didn't start it myself. It's actually something that someone else started, another editor, and I was brought on along with Anthony Dragonetti as like co-editors with this person. And I had just found it like basically like a month after I had started like engaging with the writing like community or world or whatever, like again, because before 2019 I was just like a ghost to it. I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't read anybody or know anything about it. And then I kind of got like brought in by happenstance again. And yeah, like I discovered it, and I ended up talking to the editor a lot, because it was one of the few lit mags around at the time that like I actually resonated deeply with, and I felt really compelled by early on. And like it had only been open I think for like a few months at that point, And yeah, then me and Anthony got asked to become co-editors, and then the founder left about a month after that, and just told us like we could just run the site if we wanted to, would just do whatever, and like he would just pay for the hosting and just let us like do our thing. And me and Anthony kept it going, and I guess like because Anthony got focused on other projects and I got really invested in running surfaces, that it just eventually kind of like I became like the de facto like editor in chief or like face of it or whatever. And since then, like basically it's been a rotating series of like co-editors that help me do a lot of like the slush like submission work and stuff.
Do you have
Okay.
like an engineer's? Oh, sorry, Ben. I just wanted to get this out because I mean the attention to detail on these blueprints or whatever you want to call them. I mean they're incredible to someone like me who doesn't have that kind of mind. Is that all gleaned from your father's veteran, experiences, or do you have like an engineer's mentality by that you got honest?
So a lot of the diagrams and stuff in the book or in Mortar are things that I just found and like I was just including basically as flavor. But I have like done like little like technical diagram like collages before, and I kind of try to keep that like air of like technical detail or like machinery involved in the collages I make, where like I tend to prefer like angular like looks and stuff to them, and like just over and like emphasizing like complexity. Like the cover for Mortar, which is on there, like that I did by overlaying I think 7 diagrams on top of each other of like guns and stuff that were like in those like blown up diagrams, where it basically shows like every individual part of the gun pulled out of it and laid bare. And yeah, I did that by just like layering them over top of each other until it like became like a distorted mess. But like the obsession with technical detail, I think, is just something that I don't know. Like it's the only thing where like I feel like I have some kind of level of very mechanical, like organized thinking, because otherwise when it comes to like the rest of my life, the rest of my interests, I am a much more chaotic person.
Yeah.
See, I'm sorry, one more thing, Ben.
Sorry, go ahead.
I see that you have published Mike Klein on here, who's been a guest and contributed art to us before on here. I'm kind of conflicted on his work, but he's pretty sharp. Is he a frequent contributor?
I'm trying to remember if he's contributed anything before that zine, because he did like he's definitely been a reader for a very long time and a fan. I actually contributed like a blurb like or little preface thing to his whatever zine he has that's coming out soon-ish, I think. From where is it from? I think it's coming out from Self Fuck or whatever by Evan Easeline. But yeah, like Surfaces has like a pretty wide variety of stuff that it publishes. Like I have a particular aesthetic like vision for it, but like it's hard to articulate because like there's a lot of stuff that I will put on there that isn't completely resonant with previous things. But I tend to emphasize like stuff that just feels dissonant with other things that I read from like other lit mags, and I just like try to cultivate something that feels like unique and not something you could get like anywhere else. And so that's why I also tend to be very picky, and we don't publish things at the like rate that like a lot of other mags do.
And the online magazines are such a crapshoot. They come and go. As soon as they get established, they're already on their way out. It seems like. So you kind of have to forge your own. And I know because I was co-editor on Surreal Grotesque for about a year, and it felt like it was already dying by the time I got there. Unfortunately, they don't last long. Most of them. Have you noticed?
Yeah, like unless like they're getting funding from like some kind of like a lot of like with presses that actually release like books, like the funding can be like really sketch sometimes. Or just like comes from someone's like trust fund or whatever. And like lit mags like tend to die out a lot, like especially if they're not run by like someone in like an MFA and they're just done like as like someone's hobby, like I do. Um, but like I don't know. I get like Surfaces has had like a surprising like level of longevity to it that even I was kind of shocked by, and I think it's because I've just always done it as this thing that I just is in the background and I do like just kind of as I go, and also I've never been like really adherent to a lot of the standards that I think that kind of burn people out. And it does make it like kind of run like chaotically where like stuff falls through or like, I'll be behind on stuff. Like I mentioned like frequently on my Twitter that like I am just like behind on shit like constantly. But like it also makes it so that I don't feel as like stressed out by the mere existence of it. Because I don't do like submission we don't do submissions like quarterly or whatever. We don't like have like strict like deadlines or like response times and stuff. It's like I just do it when I'm able to, and I think that like having that level of like obligation to it has made it so it's something that I always want to do and don't end up like wanting to stop it just because it like stresses me or gives me anxiety.
Yeah, that's definitely understandable. I think I was somewhat aware of Surfaces not too long after it started. I do know that I'm pretty sure probably around when the original founder was still there, someone I know on Facebook messaged me and asked me if I run Surfaces, which I thought was kind of funny. But I have been like following it on and off, and I think that's probably where I came across like No Tiger, because I saw that you were the editor, and I saw that Apocalypse Party had published it, and so I picked it up, wanting to read some more poetry, and I just really enjoyed the book.
Thank you. It's like it is weird, like how people have like come to it. Because Surfaces, like one of the things I'm proud of with it is that like it's had like a really idiosyncratic like audience over the years. Like I feel like it's never existed like quite firmly in its own like in like a wider crowd. Like I've always been kind of like closely linked to like misery tourism and that whole like orbit and stuff, but like overall like I've never tried to make it like super explicitly like part of a any other orbit. I just kind of do it as its own thing. And as a result, like I always get consistently surprised by the people that like read it or already know about it and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's useful to try to avoid being in those circles, especially like this past week. We've seen some of the the drama that comes from that. But the what are so I see that you publish zines on here. Is that something you do on a regular basis, or do you prefer to like do longer form zines, or do you prefer to like have the like shorter form ones where you just have like the image and the piece on the website? Or
So it's all like digital stuff, and it's basically like just something that like I got the idea of doing it because I had contributors, namely Rachel Lillum, that like wanted to do zines, but like also weren't like looking for like getting them like physically distributed yet. And so I was like, okay, I think it'd be cool like if I just had it as this thing, this like little repository that lets me host zines that my friends make that I think are really compelling or like and like deserve to have some kind of permanent place to sit. Like for example, the Vertical Anarchist Manifesto is something that was made 2 years before I ever like made the zines page. Like it was made ages ago, but I was like I remembered it very distinctly, and that like it only existed like as this like link on um the friend's like Twitter post for it that was super old. And I was like, oh, no, I want like some kind of like permanent place to like be able to link people to. And so yeah, it just became this thing where I just like I have like this sort of archivists like mentality about a lot of stuff. And I like I'm almost obsessed sometimes with just wanting to archive stuff that is like hard to find or just weird like internet ephemera and stuff like that.
I'm the same way because you know that it can be gone tomorrow, a dead link, or it was taken down due to TOS or content, problems, and it needs to be, preserved in some way, regardless of how, of its good or bad merit, right?
Yeah, like I that kind of comes from my dad because like he uh is like an old school like pirate. He was really into the wares scene like in the late 90s and stuff, and he has like bookshelves worth of just organized like hard disks that he has like basically all the media of any kind that he's like engaged with in the past like 20 years is just like on a hard disk in like on a bookshelf in their house. And I think it came from there where like just this like obsessive fixation with like making sure that like things that affect you in some way aren't just lost to time, which I think like there are people that like are not super into that for like the internet, but I think especially now like there's things that like even if like records exist online forever, like there's a point where stuff just becomes impossible to find even if it is out there somewhere.
Even if you use a Wayback Machine, you got to pinpoint the date that it might have been saved to, and then it goes out of phase or whatever. It's weird. It's wonky. But if people don't preserve these things, then you might remember it differently than it actually was. But if you can access it and go back, then you are able to keep a picture of it in your head, and that is important. Even if it's like a stupid fanfic brony story. I mean, anything that you came across, you may need later for something. You never know, right?
Yeah, I've also like advocated before that like people should like save things, like just save images they find like online or on Twitter, like just obsessively, like just save anything that stirs anything in you for like even a second, because I've had the experience so much like over the years of like coming across something and really enjoying it or it like affecting me in some way, and then I like remember it randomly like years later and I want to go find it again, and it's like, oh, it's impossible because it was like on like Tumblr like 5 years ago or whatever, and like trying to search like these big social media sites that dominate the internet is even more impossible than finding just like old.
We lost you there for a second.
Oh, I was just saying that basically, like, when you, I've said before, you should save everything you come across like online, like if it stirs anything in you at all, because I've had the experience like multiple times where I try searching for stuff like that I remembered like affected me in some way years later, and like it's impossible to find, especially if it's something like on Tumblr or Twitter or any of these like really big social media sites that have everything archived, but searching them is impossible.
And if you found it on 4chan, you better save it, because I mean those things, the like after a day they become impossible to find.
Oh yeah, like whenever I'm on like image boards and stuff, like I basically like it's gotten to the point where I've tried searching for like ways to like save things into a folder in like one click, because like I will go through threads on like /K or X or whatever and just save basically every image and every thread I come across, because like I usually, if I go to the like 4chan now, it's usually because I'm just looking for interesting pictures that people have, because they're like you'll just randomly come across stuff that like you've never seen before.
Yeah, I mean that's still one useful thing for it. The thing with like image boards is that they have a reputation for a reason, but surprisingly, as long as you at least on 4chan, if you avoid places like a Poll and RK9, it's actually not that bad of an experience to browse them.
Yeah, like a lot of the places that I've browsed, like Poll kind of took over in terms of attitude, like, and just like like that's the attitude of a lot of boards. But like I don't know, like I feel like it's not too bad if I'm like not even there to like interact with any of it. Like if I just read it, like it's whatever to me. And a lot of the time when I go there, I'm like looking for images and stuff. So it really just does not bother me. Like I've never really understood the like boogeyman mentality it gets, I guess, because like even though it has like a lot, it is the source of a lot of shitty stuff. I feel like overall it's like if your level of engagement with it is at a certain point, like it's kind of harmless even to go to it. I've never really been too bothered by it. I grew up like browsing X and like stuff like that, and was not like affected or made like I even like I browsed that stuff for like years alongside just like using Tumblr, and before like 2018 or so I was kind of just like a normal like pretty like soft person that didn't use like any like harsh language really other than the F word. Like
Yeah, I guess for me, like those boards, it's less like that they're evil and more that it's annoying, because when you go on Poll, it's like, oh, it's another thread about how black people are the source of every problem in the world. Oh, on R9K, it's another thread about someone complaining they don't have a girlfriend. It's just annoying to me. But yeah, X, it can occasionally have some good content. I mean, like the whole SCP Foundation came out of like one post on there. I think it was originally on X. It might have been originally like on a creepypasta thread. I don't know.
yeah, like I've just never it's like as long as you go there with like not like wanting to engage with like the bad stuff, like it's really easy to avoid overall, because like I don't know, like the thing on like uh 4chan compared to like Twitter, because I have a lot of experience with like Twitter reactionaries and stuff. On 4chan, at least, like they're pretty like it's pretty easy to see when someone's like has an angle to what they're saying, because they don't bother hiding it under like all of the like weird like esoteric language that like some people will on Twitter. Like I'll be on Twitter and there will be people like end up getting like surprised are like as bad as they are, because they managed to just like mask it under a bunch of like flowery language or whatever.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. There's like that's another good comparison. Like 4chan, like you can just be openly an asshole on Twitter. Like you kind of have to hide it, and then it just rots people's brains, even people who like seem decent at first glance. And then a little bit later, you're just like, oh, what the hell happened to this person? Twitter happened to them. I knew I should. I'm gonna switch to my fucking not safe for work account and stay on there. It's a lot nicer.
Yeah. Let's see. We got another guest coming on in about, I'd say, 12 minutes. But I don't know what. Do you feel we've been representative of your work overall? Probably could have been I probably could have been a little better informed. But as you said, it's really just No Tiger and Psy Mortar that I know of. Is there more out there in zine form that we haven't discussed?
Nothing that's really not in the book. Like I think the book is pretty like comprehensive about with like what you can get out of my work, because like I really don't produce like a ton. Like I'm not publishing, like I'm never really submitting anything. I haven't done like just random submissions to places like that I'm not already like involved in or like invested in the person running it in some way. And probably since early 2019, I kind of just got tired of it very quickly. I started doing it for a while and then like just got exhausted with it immediately because like I can't really do like any of the etiquette or like the like just sort of social game that comes with like literary publishing stuff. I have no patience for it, and that's part of why I run Surfaces the way I do. Like I answer emails in like really like informal, like unprofessional ways, like just because I don't have like the energy to or motivation to do anything else.
You can get stuck in a place where all you do is promote other people's work instead of your own and your own people if you're not careful. I mean, that's something I experienced, because I was always trying to be everybody's best friend.
Yeah, like that's like the big thing that I had like issues I have with literary publishing have a lot to do with like just finding like overall there's a level of like I don't know, like I don't think it's wrong for people to be positive, but I also find that there's like a level to which you can see that a lot of it is like networking facade, and I have no like tolerance for it. It just bugs me when I'm around that kind of thing. And like overall my work like is basically all in No Tiger. There's a lot of like disparate stuff that I would just post or whatever, especially a lot of collage work that is like just on my Twitter or whatever and not really anywhere else. And there's a couple of like prose pieces that are out there that like are like there's one on like harsh lit that's like nowhere else, but like I don't know, like overall like I don't produce a lot, like I don't write like constantly like some people do. It's something I like everything I write usually ends up out there in some way. I don't tend to trim fat or like um just not publish stuff. I guess the only thing really to keep like that I would want to like promote right now is that like I am writing a book currently that is still kind of in its early stages, but I am like trying to do like an actual like novel quote unquote type thing called Dog Food Summer.
Oh, I love that title. I love those titles that you can't even guess at where the connection is, and maybe there is no connection. It's just an imagery thing, like Allen Ginsberg used to say, put two words together that have no, connection, and for some reason it's just a kick to the eyes. I love titles like that. Grasshopper Jungle, Dog Food Summer.
Yeah, that's the type of writing I love, and like it like the reason I chose that is because it's if you don't mind me like describing what like the project's going to be about, like it's basically a novel about a character that like there's a lot of like dog like imagery in it because the main character is named Dog Shit, and it's about her living in this town called Dull Sword, which is in the White Sands missile testing range in New Mexico, which is not like obviously like impossible. Like it, like I am interested in like this setting that kind of exists in a place where it can't exist and just kind of exists displaced through like from time and reality. And it's taking a lot of influence from stuff like Soviet like sci-fi, like the Metro series and like Roadside Picnic and everything, where it's going to be about like this character, but like the town and like setting itself is just as important. and there's a lot of elements where like they exist in this sort of sci-fi or like paranormal like world where things kind of just work in a way that people understand better through living around them and like in a folklore sense rather than understanding them in a rational sense.
So it's sort of similar to like I guess like magic realism where there's just it's not like high fantasy where like people like control magic, or it's like a major, or it's like the focus of the story. It's just like it's a everyday uh place, but you know magic happens there and it's just part of, you know, their everyday setting.
Yeah, like to give an example, there's this like subway system in the town that is like the primary way people get around, and there's no real explanation for why there is like a working like rail system in this town that shouldn't exist inside of a missile testing range. And there's a lot of stuff about how like it operates with no staff or anything. It operates 24/7. There's nobody down there other than people who like take it, and it is basically the only way you can actually like travel around, because there's an implication that like going too far out into the sands, like away from buildings, kind of just you just like disappear. And also that like the rail system exists in like these massive tunnels that are like way too wide for like a subway, and that if you try and walk along the tunnels like yourself, like without the train, you just are gone. Like that's it. Like you just kind of get erased. And I have like a lot of stuff like written out like that where there's all of these like locations or like things that operate in the world that people there don't really understand beyond how to live around them.
Erased by who or what? Or is that we got to
It's
read?
kind of, yeah, it's kind of ambiguous where like basically like it's kind of inspired by like how some stuff is described in the Metro 2033 books, where like if you don't know your way around these things or know how to traverse like the actual area, like you just kind of end up dead.
Okay.
Sort of like the catacombs underneath Paris. If you just kind of wander them too much, you'll eventually get lost, and it'll probably take a long time before you're found.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about saving things, preserving them for posterity, you know, and archiving them. I remember this old, and this ties back to Metro and Russian, I don't know, propaganda animation or whatever that you were talking about. Polygon, this animated short about a tank that comes to life and hunts down the commander that I get that oversaw the army, or the general or whatever, and it hunts him down, and I think it hunts down some of the other soldiers that drove it. I don't remember, but yeah, I don't know. It's just, and it took me a while to know to come across that, because you know it was not it was basically purged from everything for so many years. You know, I don't think it was allowed to be shown in Russia even, but you know I found out it was called Polygon. So yeah, save everything that's out there for future, you know, reference.
Yeah, you never know like what might come in handy to like have around. Like I always return to like stuff I've saved, like just to like try and like kickstart some like inspiration and everything.
Yeah, that's you know, they do say like everything is on the internet forever. That, you know, may not be the case. The internet is becoming increasingly corporatized, and there's a lot, you know, these big media companies would rather not have on there, and they're gonna, you know, do what they can to get them off. And you know, with things like, you know, copyright law being cracked down on a lot harder, you know,
You know,
work that's supposed to be transformative is harder to keep online.
if everybody will stop trying to cancel everybody else, though, that might go a long way in discouraging, you know, corporate hand wringing as well. Though, you know, let people be until they actually physically, you know, trespass or against you is my idea, you know. But,
Yeah, I tend to like have like I don't know, like a measured view of that kind of thing where like I understand when like people don't want to publish certain people, blah blah blah, but like there is one thing where like I have kind of taken a stance implicitly that like even if like there's somebody that contributed to surfaces that like I learned like is a bad person or whatever, uh or I've contributed to like a mag run by like a person that I don't like associate with anymore and stuff like that, like I don't really care to like remove their work or remove my work from their stuff because I don't really see a lot of value in that. Like I understand it's a signal that you don't support that person, but like I've never like basically I've never understood the like purpose of like removing a person's work from your like magazine or whatever, because to me like that all that does is make myself feel better and like get rid of my like the history that I was associated with this person, which I don't really have like an interest in hiding. Like I like yeah, I used to be associated with this like person that is bad or whatever. Like I'm not gonna hide that. I don't support them now, but there's no point in like erasing the fact that that association used to exist in the past.
Yeah, it's very performative. So our next guest is here, Mika. Do you want to stick around to try to speak with them for a little bit, or do you need to get going?
I think you may want to talk to this gentleman. He's fascinating, but you know it's up to you.
I think